All right. Welcome to this next episode of. It's not really basics. I don't know. I haven't actually started a series on this, I guess. But so what I'm going to be doing on this series is, if you didn't know, I was a Siemens application engineer for quite a few years now. Now I have started my own company, Alpha Industrial Technologies, and so I'm no longer doing that. But we primarily focus on Siemens controls and automation. In this video, I'm stepping through just the real basics, logics of setting up a S120 system, multi-axis S120 system in Portal. So a couple of videos ago, I've got a couple of other videos that I did before, and one was doing with technology objects, and I had a comment that it would be nice to just have a video that'd be set up like this. So I'm not going to have my screen most likely in kind of like picture in picture. I don't know. Maybe I might edit it in like that, but just for now, I'm just going to go through and step through just the basics process of setting up a S120 multi-axis system with TIA Portal. I'm using version Portal 16 because I realized that I haven't installed STARTDRIVE for version 17. So without further ado, I'll start. So I've already got my Portal view up here, and what we're going to be doing is this is actually the project view if you're not familiar, but what I'm going to do is just make a new project, call it S120 multi-axis. I'm going to try to make this a fairly quick video, but we'll see. I might have to jump through a couple little spots. All right, so I'm going to jump in real quick, and we're going to just go straight to the drive systems and SINAMICS S120, and everything is going to be based off of the control unit. Now, you're going to be using the CU320-2 if you're doing a multi-axis system, so we're just going to select that and go ahead and let it pull into the project. Now from here we have, this is actually in the device and networks setup. And if you're not familiar with this view is broken down into three different tabs: topology view, network view, and device view. Well, this is going to be the same view for anything between PLCs, HMIs, network devices, depending on how big your project is, because Portal is completely integrated, totally integrated automation. And so we're going to be going into this one device and setting up the different things on it. So there's a couple of different ways to get to the device. I clicked off of the device view over onto the network view to show you this, but what we actually are going to be needing to do is be on the device view, and you can select the device that we have here, and you can go through and set everything up that you need to set up for that. If you know anything about the CU320-2, there's actually two ports on this, and we are always going to be setting, if you're setting the telegrams to communicate to the PLC, you're going to be going with this Profinet interface and not working with this Ethernet commissioning interface. One quick thing, always set those on two different subnets, otherwise your processor or the control unit was going to fault out. So over in the hardware catalog, we're going to add in a couple of different things. An S120 system really consists of three basic components: the control unit, the line module, and the motor modules. If you're not familiar with those terms, it's a little bit, you need to get used to the system right now, but I'm trying to kind of just do a basic overview of everything that we have going on here. So some systems we actually basic line modules, which is just the dumb rectifier, it is going to need to have a control or a drive click topology, And so we're just going to bring a basic line module over into our device view. And when we click on that, our property window will change over to actually be concerning that line module. And we would want to set here and actually pick the actual catalog information, line module selection, and we actually pick which line module we're wanting to do. So I'm wanting to do, we'll just select this 100 kW, and I'm just kind of pulling out of a hat. I'm going to do three different motor modules and set them all up on this system. So again, I talked about previously, you have these three basic components: control units, basic line module, and then motor modules. The motor modules are the actual inverters themselves. The S120 system is going to be a multi-axis setup, and so it's going to be a common DC bus type setup where you have a separate diode rectifier section, and you can pick different flavors of that, and then you have inverter bridges that hang off of that connect out to your motors. Whereas with like a G120 or something like that, all of that is built into the power module. So I'm going to bring in a couple of different motor modules, and by default you're going to see these different drive axes, the drive Cliq. These blue cables are the drive Cliq, and if you have ever worked with S120s, you know that this topology here can be a headache if you're not careful. If this is your first time working with the S120s, you need to make sure that these cables, which are usually gray cables that come with the motor modules, are connected up exactly like they're shown here. So in this instance, you would have your control unit connect from X100 on the control unit to X200 on the basic line module. And then the basic line module would connect from X201 over to X200 on the first motor module. If you don't set this up correctly, worst case is, or I guess best case is, you're going to get an error. Worst case is you're going to set up all of your motor information thinking that, and the drive system is going to not know what to do with that information, because this is how you set which motor module is actually connected up to which motor itself. And so this topology sets everything, and if there's any sort of problem, the system will not run, and this is where it's set. So what we're going to do now, since we just brought in this drive axis, I'm going to click on it, and it will bring up the same way that we did before. We're going to select the motor module itself. So this is the actual catalog number of the motor module that you have selected. We're going to select it. Let's just select, say, a 5 amp module. And if you notice, we have these two options here. This is very important, because if you run your motors in servo control, then all of the motors that are connected, or all of the motor modules that are connected to this control unit, have to be run in servo or volts per hertz mode. If you run them in vector control, say for like an induction motor without an encoder, you would have to set all of the ones that are going to be vector all on the same control unit. So there is a restriction there. For this one, we're just going to set them to servo. We're going to assume that we have a encoders or resolvers or something, and I'm just going to select this 5 amp motor module. Now, remember, make sure that you actually pick the correct motor module there, because by default it will not let you use a different motor module if it's not set up correctly here. The motor module, you select it, set the topology, and now what you're going to do is actually set what a motor and bring it into a motor module. So before, we've been adding a motor module to this kind of full drive system. Well, now we're actually going to bring in a motor and bring it in and put it a a motor module itself. This first one, I'm going to do the easiest type because you love Siemens and you've got Siemens drives, Siemens PLCs, and Siemens motors. And if you use the drive click motor interface on your permanent magnet servo motors, you can just drag this drive click motor over into this space on this single motor module, and it'll bring in this information. Now, if you notice, there's this drive click cable that has now been connected here. Well, we set up this as a drive click motor. So this little motor here, when we click inside this box, we're going to actually get this selection here. So because we have a drive click motor, it's going to go out the first time we set it up. It's going to see what type of motor's out there, and it's going to bring all that information in. Now, I'm going to do another motor module, and this time I'm going to do a motor module or a motor with just a regular induction motor, not a Siemens servo motor. So same process. We're picking in our S120 system, which I'm going to just pull that off right now. We're going to go through and we're going to set single motor module. Obviously, if you have double motor modules, it's going to be under this double motor module. If you notice, as I brought that single motor module in, you see how this is dark and this is light? That means that motor hasn't been configured. So just a quick way of being able to tell, oh, hey, I'm not completely done. You'll also notice it auto-defined the topology here. Now, it's pretty good to always use the default topology, but we can, just a thing to think about. So I'm going to go over here and just pick an induction motor. Actually, I'm going to do it this way because odds are, if you're using just like a Baldor or any other just general purpose induction motor from any other manufacturer, SEW, then you're going to be using not this induction motor selection that I clicked on at first. You're going to click to the motor data input, and then you're going to take this induction motor and then just pull it over and drop it in here. Now, if you notice, it didn't pull down this drive click connection. Well, I'm going to go in here and it's going to come through and we're going to bring down motor details, and we can put in our rating plate values for what those values are. So this is US, so 480, let's say, let's do an 8.0 amp, and then that's going to be in kW, 8 amps, I don't know, let's just say 5. Power factor 0.6, it's kind of small. Motor frequency 60 hertz, 18. We'll say 1750, and then we'll say our maximum motor speed is 1800 RPM. Now, I was just hitting tab to tab through all of those, and then we can have optional motor data and some motor brake. Now, if you notice, I haven't gone through and set up what actual motor module selection we have. Remember, I just selected that motor, and it is configured, the motor module is configured, and it should all work out. Everything should be in the correct way. Now, one thing that we said before was that this needs to be running in servo control. So you can actually run an induction motor in servo control. You just have to have an encoder. So with an external induction motor, like say it's an SEW motor that you're using, you're going to have to import a measuring system. So you're going to have to bring that encoder into the system somehow. Let's just say that this is just a regular HTL encoder, like a Dynapar 2048 pulse encoder. So that's going to be a HTL TTL encoder. You're going to drag that, and that's going to attach to that that motor module. Once you bring that encoder system in, it says, hey, this is how you're going to make that drive Cliq connection, just the same as it was with the drive Cliq motor, because this is going to be using what's called a signal module or an SM module. If you notice over here, there is an SM module here, but in the system, you'll see this as SMI, so signal module integrated. There's a bunch of different flavors of signal module and for the cabinet. So there's an SMC, so signal module cabinet, and this encoder evaluation, because it's an HTL TTL, it's going to be an SMC 30. There's SMC 10s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and depending on what type of encoder or resolver that you have, you'll need to pick out which one it is. I won't go into the details right now, but if you have your Siemens sales contact, they should have an application engineer that could work with you. If you don't have someone like that, feel free to drop a comment on this, and I'll answer it eventually. And so to configure the basics, we should be pretty much it on it. We said that we were going to do a 2048. We'll do a 2048 AB with the reset. These are just depending on what type, but your basic configuration is just 2048 HTL, just kind of like we said before. Now, we should have absolutely everything configured. Now, if you notice, this is not set up as being gray, because that means it is not configured yet. Well, because it's a drive Cliq encoder, it's going to go out and get all that information, and then once it uploads it into the project, that will be gray just like everything else. It'll pull that information in automatically. So, last thing we probably want to do here is if we had a PLC. So, that is actually what we'll do right now, and that is the basics setup for a S120 system. So your overall network view, I'm just going to add in a PLC, just a random PLC here. We'll just say a 1500 CPU, and we'll go with a nice little 1511T. And then we're going to put this in here, because one thing to know the difference between these different views, because as you change over to the device view, if you notice the PLC, this is configuring the PLC rack, and so all the I/O and all of those modules and everything, the same thing. So we're still in device view. If we switch over to our drive unit here, same thing. We're configuring our S120 system. Last thing I want to show you is to name your units, and these will be the names that will come in, and I'll show you here in a second. It makes a difference in your Profinet address. So CU1, we're going to call it BLM1. We're going to drive 1. And if this is like a something like that, or you can also put those names in here. Last thing I want to show you on this video is we're going to go through and just real quick show just a little bit about this control unit. So when you click on the module here, you have your Telegram configuration. So we'll talk about this more in depth here maybe in this next video, but for now, just know that the control unit itself is set up, the telegrams are set up by clicking on this Profinet interface once you have all of your other devices in. So kind of the general step and the general layout of how you set one of these devices up is you bring in the control unit. You have to have one control unit for every six motor modules, or if you're doing volts per hertz, you can do up to 12. But it, bring in the control unit first, set up your line module on that control unit. Sometimes you won't even have a line module. I will say, if you have a line module that is being controlled by the control unit that you put in the line module then or there, and then you add in your motor module, attach whatever type of motor, drag that motor into the motor module, and what you're looking for is you're looking for all dark gray boxes. And the dark gray boxes means you have set everything up and you should be ready for a download once you get your system powered up. So this was a pretty quick introduction to the basics of setting up an S120 system. This will get you to where you at least have a bit of familiarity with where the menu items are and where the different parameters, just for the basic setup for it. In the next setup, or in the next video of this series, I'll go through in a little bit more detail and kind of talk about how we set up different things. Until then, if you have a question, leave a comment. I'll try to answer. Again, I'm a business owner, so it takes a little bit to get back to the comments. I appreciate your patience on that. But if this has been helpful, drop a like on it, and I'll see you next time.